Spokane is a beautiful city, but that beauty is usually coupled with brokenness. I think of terms like generational abuse and systemic poverty, and those are two topics that, if I'm honest, in my life, the learning curve is pretty steep. I hear kid stories all the time, and every once in a while I'll hear one and I'll think that can't be true, that can't be happening. But I don't know why a kid would be making up such a painful story and a story with so much shame.
Our kids have a lot of stories. They have a lot of things that they've overcome. And ultimately we decided to make this video because it's hard asking a kid to stand up on a stage and share their story, the pain, the trials, the circumstances that are just unfair. We want to help bear some of that burden of sharing it. They face obstacles that many of us would never even imagine could be something that a child would face. And they do it with sometimes with such a beautiful grace, and sometimes they do it like a kid would do it. Rough and messy and broken and hard. It's not what God wanted for them. It's not what God wants for them. And it's an effect of the sin and the brokenness of our world. They're still figuring out how to handle their feelings, how to express how they're feeling, how to stand up for themselves, and how to advocate for what's right. They're still figuring out that God loves them and that He has a better story for them, that He has a greater love for them.
So yes, they're difficult stories, but we continue those stories and we don't give up. And we share that there is a God who cares for these kids and their stories and wants to redeem them.
We had a group of guys that we were hanging out with in Hilliard over the course of this year, and we invited these guys to go to camp. Camp was great. It was also hard. We get down there, we start to hear the message, and then the speaker starts with just talking about family. And our student leader led the way, and he just talked about his broken family, how his mom had left them. And we went around, we had 11 guys in there, and every single guy talked about a family member that had left them. And it was this hard moment, realizing that these kids are growing up. What was beautiful about camp was at the end, these guys were sitting in the circle again, talking about our experience. And the two guys that had led the way just looked at the group and said, we started by talking about my family and how my parents have left me, but I feel like I've experienced what family could look like and should look like here with you guys. And that was beautiful.
I think one of the hardest things that I've just seen our kids deal with is their ability to deal with conflict on a day-to-day basis. There's a frightening amount of students that don't know how to deal with conflict in any other way than violence. I mean, I've seen an all-out brawl break out in the middle of Riverfront Park. Somebody who I've seen so much progress and so much hope and life, and in an instant she just snapped, and it took multiple leaders to just hug her and keep her from hurting herself or anybody around her. The sad thing was that the structures that should be in place, the people who are supposed to be supporting them, unfortunately those are the first people that they call, but they call them to come down and join the fight with them. And so the parents showed up ready to fight each other. And man, it's just it goes to show this is not just something that they're dealing with as a generation, but it's something that they've been taught. We have to start breaking these generational cycles that they're stuck in so that they can become members of society that are giving back and are successful and are full of life. I mean, since then, I've had interactions with a lot of these kids, and they're still the sweet kids that I know. They still have so much hope, and they have bright futures. They're good kids. But we have to be better about supporting them and teaching them how to deal with these conflicts in ways where they don't use violence.
I first met her just a couple of weeks before we went to camp last summer, and she just pretty quickly sat down at the table and just opened up. She told us that her dad had tragically died when she was like 4 years old, and her mom, to cope, became addicted to meth. And while she was on drugs, she really abused and neglected not only my friend, but her siblings as well. I took her to camp and just had the most incredible experience with her. For the first time, she got to be a kid. And on the last night, I just remember her getting to the front row of worship and her hands in the air just singing the song, and the lyrics say, "I'm no longer a slave to fear. I'm a child of God." And I think the fear of what she was going back home to hit with the truth that she was singing, and she got really emotional. I wish I could say that it was like all beautiful after that, but just 1 week after we were worshiping, she called me, and I didn't know this at the time, but she was calling me to say goodbye. She swallowed a bottle of pills. By the grace of God, they revived her and were able to clear her stomach of all the chemicals. It's probably one of the lowest moments of ministry for me. And unfortunately, that is just one of the 9 times I've been in the hospital with girls that have tried to take their life since getting this job here a year ago. They're believing the lies that the society tells them. At YFC, we're trying to combat all those lies with the truth that they are worthy and they are loved, and we do want them so badly. We do life and we try to encourage each other to just try to live one more day. Try to be a voice of encouragement to each other and to those around us. We're reminded that we're not alone.
It was my first month with YFC, and we were in the middle of camping fundraising season. So I was at the youth center, and we set up in the little teams and set people out. There was 1 student left and myself. And so I asked him, "Hey man, do you want to go hand out some flyers, go to camp?" As we walked down the sidewalk, I asked a handful of small talk questions, trying to get to know this guy. I eventually asked about his family, talked about his childhood, and that the home he grew up in had a constant flow of drugs and prostitution and weapons. That every male in his family was either dead or incarcerated. He's basically been told since he was born that this is how his life is gonna go. And he told me about the 4th of July when he was 9 years old, and one of the traditions in their family was to take Roman candles and they would have wars with those. Unfortunately, one of this guy's shots had the perfectly wrong trajectory and flew across the yard and his best friend right in the eye, and it ended up being a fatal injury. His best friend passed away that night, and where he was raised, the punishment for that, regardless of it being an accident, was to be put in an adult facility for 3 years. So from 9 to 12, he was in an adult facility. I can't imagine what that would do to a child's development. And he is trying to turn his life around, and he lights up when we have conversations about what he could be and what he could do, that he could break the chain of drug dealing and crime that his family's been in, and that he's capable of working, going to trade school, going to college. And we've had some super sweet moments getting to talk about those things, getting to hug each other on the street downtown, and we have equal amounts to teach one another about life and about overcoming hardship. He's loved by a lot of people in YFC and in this city. We're always there with open arms, and I love it when he walks through the door. And I'm proud of him, right where he's at.
We get to hang out with a lot of hurting and broken kids, and so many of the stories are like stuff that you could never imagine, you know, and how they can continue to keep themselves together is like beyond me. It's amazing to see what God's done through YFC. I'm convinced with the work we do, these kids that we work with would never hear the gospel if it wasn't for our City Life Center strategically placed throughout Spokane. Every day it's just a reminder of it's worth the fight, it's worth the battle, because we fight for the lives of these young people through a lot of the good, bad, and the ugly, and there's a lot of bad and ugly, and so it's all worth it in the end when we get to see the fruit come from standing in the gaps for this young generation.
I remember when I first came to this position and had the opportunity to hear a young man share with his peers at one of our clubs in West Central. You could hear a pin drop as this young man began to share his relationship with his dad. And he shared how his father would get so angry with him that at times he would kick him or punch him so hard that his ribs would be broken or fractured. I can't even imagine what that young man was going through. He went on to share that he was taking up boxing, and he told his peers that when he punched that bag, he imagined it being his father. It was at this time that he just stopped and said, "That's my story." There was no mention of redemption or hope or reconciliation. He just stopped. And it was in that moment that I thought, how can we tell this young man that there is a Father in heaven who loves that child?
The students we work with are beautiful. They're resilient. They have a strength that I don't even think they realize that they have. Just earlier today, I watched as a student came into the building and was greeted by one of our staff, and the way that they hugged. How do you put words to that? Yeah, because our kids, they face things that are so unfair, and there's such a mentality of I have to protect myself, I have to take care of myself, and that self-ownership that just isn't something that's supposed to happen at such a young age. The way that they can walk into one of our centers and just hug a staff member or a leader and know that they are loved is so beautiful.